I'm Georgia Harrison. I'm a reality TV star, activist and presenter. You will probably know me from Towie, Love Island, or my documentary called Georgia vs Bear, Revenge Porn. I am well known for being a victim of image-based sexual abuse, which obviously really does come down to consent. So I don't think I fully understood what consent was. When I was in school, there wasn't that many conversations about consent, and it wasn't something that was spoken about at all, to be honest. My main understanding of consent was just, you have to ask someone their permission for something before you do it. Consent doesn't just come down to getting a no. It's very important to get a yes and make sure that you're reading a situation correctly. It's so important that people are having these discussions between their friends.
So my name's Laura Coscadden. I'm a Detective Chief Inspector with Thames Valley Police, and I've spent about half my career investigating sexual offences. This campaign's hugely important to me. As police, we see the impact of sexual offences, we see the end result, and its effect on people's lives is devastating. We were given the ability and the powers to investigate, and through that we enter into people's lives when the worst thing has happened to them. And that gives us quite a unique position in terms of understanding and recognising the importance of consent. It's not easy to talk about a consensual sexual experience, so the idea of talking about a non-consensual sexual offence is incredibly difficult. And we work on the basis that people should be entering into those intimate and private acts with the agreement, feeling comfortable, understanding what they're doing, and wanting to take part in those acts. And what we're finding is those communications are just not taking place, or people are relying on assumptions or things that have been implied. And that's what we want to change. We want to take away the power that those myths and misconceptions can have.
My name's Dr. Fiona Vera Gray. I'm the Deputy Director at the Child and Women Abuse Studies Unit at London Metropolitan University. One of the projects that I worked with a while ago now, actually in 2013, was looking at young people's understandings of sexual consent. They understand what consent is in theory. It's the fact that in practice, some of those understandings are still seen as acceptable. So there was a difference between what's seen as acceptable sexual practice and actually an understanding of what is unlawful sexual practice. Verbal conversations can do a lot in terms of creating a better sexual experience, but it's also about non-verbal cues. If someone is looking a little hesitant, if someone is not maintaining eye contact with you, if someone is not touching your body back and you are touching their body, they're not kissing you back and you're kissing their body, these are things that might prompt you to think, I need to actually now be quite verbal in checking whether someone is okay. It's very important to talk to your peers because they may be learning from you actually that other people don't think it is okay to take from someone something that they haven't willfully, freely, happily engaged in with you.
So there are a lot of myths and stereotypes when it comes to what is consent, how do you get consent. So things like relationships. So just because you're in a relationship, an intimate relationship, that means that you've got consent. That's not the case. It's about making sure that you're having those conversations and that consent is given every time and never assuming consent.
Consent is obviously something that's very important to me, being a victim of rape, especially since the particular time that it happened. It was a case of me being asleep, so it really felt very black and white to me that it wasn't acceptable. And yet I still, when I tried to speak to the person afterwards about it, he genuinely seemed so shocked. He didn't understand why I would be upset by this happening and couldn't seem to comprehend that there would need to be some kind of conversation involved around it. It was a really scary moment for me because I would have assumed that, especially with somebody being asleep, it would have been a very clear thing that that was a crime. There was a small moment where I thought, maybe I am overreacting, which again, looking back on it, it just seems insane. I, called the police immediately. I had a really great team working with me who made me feel safe. Unfortunately, with crimes such as rape, if somebody had burgled my house and I didn't feel safe, I could move. But he's done this to my body, and I have to live in my body for the rest of my life. So that's something I get to carry around with me. I have lost my ability to trust my own judgment in whether or not I feel people are dangerous. And that has had a huge effect on my friends, my family, my job, my partners. I really hope that that's something that I will be able to get over with time. But that fear that it could happen again at any time by anybody, regardless of how nice they may seem, lives in me forever.
My name is Jay. I am the Pride Wild Stage Coordinator with Reading Pride, and I also run my own drag events business based in Reading. Whenever I am running a drag show, I always say at the beginning as the host that one of the most important policies we have for the show is that consent is key. We've all had our asses slapped, we've all been touched inappropriately, we've all had inappropriate sexual comments made at us, which makes us feel objectified and pretty disgusting, really, because underneath all the makeup and all the wigs and costumes, we're still human beings, and we have to take that home with us and carry that with us wherever we go.
My name is Jamie and I work with Reading Pride. When I heard about this campaign that Thames Valley Police were delivering, it spoke to me very loudly due to my lived experiences, both as a survivor, but also as someone who has supported people who have gone through similar lived experiences. In 2018, I had essentially gone on a dating app within the gay community, and unfortunately I was raped, and that was actually by two people. They sent me their address and I went to their house, and when I got there was actually two people there, and when I was messaging the guy I was only aware that there would be one person there. I was really taken back by that, but I'd come from a night out, so already my capacity was affected by being intoxicated, which again I think is something that I've had to work through, because there is an element of self-responsibility involved within that. And they offered me something called Tina. They had a bong, and I naively assumed that what was inside that bong was cannabis, but actually it was crystal meth. My memory is very foggy, but the things I do remember is it was absolutely horrible. And then I black out, and that's when I then woke up, and one of the guys was raping me. When I was 18 years old, trying to make sense of the fact that I chose to go to that property, I'm blaming myself. What are the force going to think? And also, when considering dating apps and stuff, the types of messages, the types of photos that you send, it tends to be very explicit. So also being aware that that would be factored in as evidence is really, really damaging, because whilst it's relevant, absolutely, there's this degree of, well, people are going to think that what happened was consensual because of the way that I projected myself prior to this experience. And actually, consent can be revoked at any time. You might consent to something and then change your mind, and that's okay.
Hi, I'm Tom. I am the Chief Engagement Officer for Reading Pride. I wanted to be a part of this and to really hope that we can open the voice of the LGBTQ+ community and talk about what is consent there. I think there are a lot of myths and stereotypes around consent and what consent is and how people can report it, etc. In a recent survey that was done at Reading University, people thought that once you've said yes, you can't say no, and that is not true in the slightest. Consent is about you and how you feel comfortable. If you are not comfortable with what is happening, that is not consensual.
I'm Yasmin. Asexuality means when you experience little to no sexual attraction towards anyone regardless of their gender. It was important for me to get involved in the campaign because there is a lack of awareness around consent, especially when it comes to the intersections of asexuality. A lot of people are kind of taught that if you're asexual, if you have the right kind of sex, it will unlock your true sexuality and it will fix you somehow. That is a pressure that a lot of asexual people have. I think a big misconception around 18 to 24-year-olds about consent is that even if you consent to having sex or you consent to doing one thing, does not mean that you consent to everything that happens after that. It's important to be able to assert your boundaries, that you only do things that you want to do, and that everybody, regardless of what gender you are, regardless of what race or sexuality or age, you are educated about this and that you're able to help.
I think a lot of the issues that get brought up, especially I hear from our community around the 18 to 24-year-old area, are the factors of reporting and whether they feel that reporting is actually going to go anywhere or do anything.
So for me, from Thames Valley Police and in my position as the head of rape and sexual offences, you can expect from myself and my teams and the officers that investigate rape and sexual offences to be really closely examining what steps you have taken to gain consent and whether you have respected the rights of the other person, whether your belief in consent is reasonable, and if it's not, then you can expect action will be taken against you, because that's very much the approach we will be taking. The main thing for me is that we give the best possible level of service to every victim that we deal with.
I've spoken to a lot of young girls who in many cases have previously had a sexual partner who has then gone on to rape them, and because they've had sex with them in the past, they felt that they always had consent to have sex with them at any time and any place, whereas that very much is not the case. Just because you've had sex with someone once in the past doesn't mean you have a right to have sexual intercourse with them at any time. I think for many women, because they've had sex with someone in the past, when it does come to a situation where they are raped or they are taken advantage of, they feel like they have less of a right to come forward about that, whereas that is absolutely not the case. For me, with my perpetrator, when it came to image-based sexual abuse, I was inconsolable at the time, and I knew that he had most definitely, at this point, no matter what he'd done in the past, he had broken a law, and it took a lot to come forward, and it took a lot to have to speak to someone about what I'd been through, but I knew the only way to stop him from going on to treat other women like this was for me to go forward to the police and put a stop to it.
My name's Grace and I'm a detective constable with Thames Valley Police, meaning that I investigate serious and complex crime, in particular sexual offences. We're seeing a rise in the number of reports at music festivals of sexual assaults, and we're really pleased that people feel able to speak out to us. But the message that I would like to give to young people is, when you're at a festival and there's drink and there's drugs, ask yourself, does this person consent to what is happening? Are they able to make that choice, and do they have the freedom to make that choice? Can somebody that is intoxicated have the freedom and capacity to make that choice if you're going to do something of a sexual nature?
My name's Abby, I work for Berkshire Women's Aid, and we provide outreach and refuge support to those at risk of domestic abuse over the age of 18. This campaign is important to us because we support people who've experienced domestic abuse and sexual violence. It's important that we recognise that people growing up in households who've experienced domestic abuse, the children in those households actually need to have messages sent to them about what is appropriate behaviour, what consent is, and actually what a healthy and safe relationship looks like. When we're talking about an unsafe relationship, we're talking about a relationship where there's a forced power imbalance. So we're talking about somebody who has a level of power and control over another person. In that type of relationship, there is no safe space for consent or conversations to take place.
Research has found increasingly that people, not just young people, are looking to pornography to understand sexual norms. And the problem is that for a lot of pornography, a lot of the mainstream stuff on these mainstream sites, the content promotes things that in reality are unlawful. It's really important to think about the fact that rape can and often is a very purposeful, intentional act. It is not a mistake, it is not a misunderstanding. The most important thing to get across about consent, it's something about the fact that we know that consent, it's multifaceted, it's complicated, it's complex, but rape isn't. If you are choosing to continue doing what you're doing, whether or not that person is wanting to do it, you are really risking committing a sexual offence that can harm someone for the rest of their life and something that is going to be taken seriously by the criminal justice system.
My name's Claire. I'm a District Crown Prosecutor at the Crown Prosecution Service in Thames and Chiltern. Sexual consent relies on a person having the freedom and capacity to agree to sexual activity. We hope through a better understanding we can encourage more people to speak out, to know when to get help, to understand better the myths and misconceptions about consent. There can be a lot of different types of dangerous behaviour within a sexual context. When something non-consensual happens to a person's body, it is a violation that they live with for the rest of their lives. These misconceptions include when somebody may not say no, they may not fight back, they may not scream or shout. That doesn't mean it wasn't rape. If there was some flirtatious behaviour, some consensual sexual activity, if sex follows, it doesn't mean it wasn't rape. If people are in a relationship, it doesn't mean that sexual activity is consensual. You can be in the middle of consensual sexual activity and then withdraw your consent. That is okay. It's also important that people understand if they meet somebody online and there's some conversation, some sexual content, explicit content, if they then meet up, that doesn't mean that they are consenting to sexual activity. A simple definition of rape is when penetrative activity happens and the other person doesn't consent to it and the penetrator doesn't reasonably believe the other person has consented. It's also important to mention that the penetrative activity is not just vaginal, it might be anal, it might also be oral penetrative activity with a penis. Our specialist lawyers understand the impact of trauma on a person when considering the evidence in a case and take that into account because everybody is different as to how they may react following a traumatic incident. They will look at the actions of a suspect in order to consider whether or not there is sufficient evidence to prosecute a case. Cases of rape and serious sexual offence can be complex. They often are prosecuted based solely on the word of an individual. We support victims by working closely with the police at the early stages in an investigation and also with other support agencies such as independent sexual violence advisors. And we will listen to victims to make sure that the measures available in court to assist them give evidence are applied for. There are a number of different ways in which victims can be supported to give their evidence in court.
So I had no idea when I first went to the police of just how low the conviction rates are. To me, it was just an immediate response. This man has broken the law. What he has done is not okay, and I'm just going to pick up the phone and call the police. There were definitely times where I was like, do I go forward with this? But I was like, no, I have to push on. I just knew that what he'd done was wrong and I had such a faith in the police system. As soon as my court case was over, I just felt such a wave of empowerment and I was so proud of myself for standing up against someone and being strong and speaking my truth.
So this campaign is hugely important to us at Thames Valley Police. We really want to be able to connect with young adults and encourage you to have conversations. We want you to talk to your peers, to adults that you trust. And we know that as police, we can't be passive about that. We need to engage with you. We need to help you understand from what we have learned about sexual offences and what we want to do to help empower you, help educate you, help you have conversations with your friends. If it empowers one person to feel and to say, I understand consent and consent wasn't there for me, for them to know that they can report that to police and what our position will be on that.
If I was to give a message about consent, I would say you can never ask too many times. So it's always good to just double check, triple check, make sure someone is feeling comfortable. Never ever assume that you've got consent. and always challenge behaviour that just doesn't sit right with you.
So I know it's uncomfortable and it doesn't need to be a fight, but just calling people out on certain use of language or the way they're being with people goes such a long way.
I think everyone needs to do better, and everyone does just need to take a look at themselves and just think, what can I do better for myself, my friends, and my community?
Consent is something that's important to everybody because anyone can be a victim of sexual abuse or sexual assault. It's important no matter what age you are, no matter what gender, no matter what race, no matter what sexuality, that you're educated about consent.
It's important that the message that we're given is that when someone's in a safe relationship, there is open, there's honest communication, there is consent that is verbalised, there is consent that is valid and is clear.
It's really important that we get the message out that you're not alone in this and we can help you. This campaign is a really good start to getting that conversation moving and getting people talking about consent.
Our message to young adults is don't shy away from having these conversations with each other. Know where to look for help and know when to speak out.
Consent is an ongoing issue. It's far better that you have those conversations out in the open rather than us having conversations with you in a police interview room when it's too late and people have overstepped the mark.
The more people that speak out on their experiences will hopefully bring a lot of change among society. Consent is far more than a simple yes or no, and it's about looking for that yes in more than one way. It's not just about hearing that yes, because that person might say yes, but they might not know what they're doing.
My advice for anyone leaving home for the first time, getting to university, just starting to figure out what social interaction really is everything does come down to consent. It is if someone gives their permission, right? You can wear what you want, you can be who you want, you can love who you want, you can act how you want, as long as it is not affecting anyone else. So it's really, really important that you respect people's boundaries and you honour their decisions. It doesn't hurt to have that conversation.